Thinking is the cause of all suffering. Stop thinking and end all of your problems. The burden of thought. Why is thinking the cause of all suffering? Well, let's take a look. Of course, we're going to use the circle, the center of the circle representing thoughtlessness, presence, surrender, being the observer, God, right? This is the non-suffering state if we are thoughtless, because we are letting God observe through us. That's what we are, right? We're letting God observe through us. So why does thought cause all suffering? Because when we start the cycles of thought, we are attaching ourselves to our somebodyness, to our ego. We are identifying with the actor. And when we do that, we go from the thoughtless state, the observer, to the ego, the somebodyness. And what happens is we are attaching ourselves. Any attachment is going to keep us caught in the illusion. We are attaching ourselves to our somebodyness. So if we think we are somebody doing something, if we think things are happening to us, if we think we're in control, if we think we know, all of these things basically create a lower limiting perspective. And when we are attached to our ego or being somebody, we can only have the perspective of what we are identifying with, right? Our perspective is limited to what we are identifying with, as opposed to not identifying with anything, not being attached to anything, and being able to observe it all. That's why it's so important to be present, stay in the center of the circle, and allow all things to take their course. Be the observer, because that allows us to see everything. And when we are thinking, we are caught in the cycles of suffering. Thought is the cause of all suffering. Why? Because we are attached. When we are identifying with the actor, we become attached. And we are creating this lower limiting perspective. This is why stop thinking and end all of your problems. Because when you stop thinking, oh, see you later, problems, peace out. You're back in the center of the circle and you become the observer, and you're not attached. You're detaching. As long as you're thinking, you're attached. It's not thinking, detached. It's center of the circle. So how do we stop thinking? How do we stop these cycles of thought, which keep us caught in the cycles of suffering, creating a separation, right? When we are thinking and we're attached to our somebodyness, the ego, we create separation, which is what duality is. This is non-duality, being the observer, being present, being thoughtless. This creates the separation. Thinking is duality. We want to be the whole, the one, which is the center of the circle, a thoughtless state. So how do we stop thinking? I have a couple notes here. There's a few things we can do to work on this. How to stop thinking. Stop thinking and end all of your problems, right? Presence, practicing presence, right? As a whole. I mean, there's many aspects to this. Practicing presence means stop thinking, doing things like mantra, right? Doing mantra helps you stay present. Another big thing, which I talk about often, is removing the aggravators, things that are stimulating and aggravating not only the mind, but the body. Because when the body is aggravated, it can aggravate the mind. What are some things that I consider aggravators from my own experience? Things like the phone, social media, taking in too much information, the news, video games, movies, all these things can aggravate or stimulate the mind, which is going to cause cycles of thought, right? And the more we take in these types of things, anything that's aggravating, even physical or or visual or auditory stimulus can be aggravating. We could talk about that too. We have to remove these things. as best as we can until we can learn how to deal with them and not get aggravated. But that's farther down in the process, right? Things for me, like my phone tends to aggravate me, throws me out of balance, right? Balance, the key word here also is balance. We got to find balance to calm the mind. Purification also goes along with removing the aggravators, because we have physical aggravators. If we're eating the wrong foods, this can be physically aggravating us and aggravating our body, and thus aggravating our mind. So purification is also very important. That's why I talk about presence and purification all the time, because we have to do both these things in conjunction to work on working out the mind. Also, reconstituting the mind, which is what? Emptying the mind is very important, because we have all these programs stuck in our minds, in our heads, and we need to get them out. But how do we do that? By taking in information, we're actually keeping them in, or keeping them locked in. So we have to, at some point, we got to stop taking information and try to empty the mind, which also gives us deeper understandings and allows the divine to work through us. How do we empty the mind? We have to stop taking information. We have to get into peaceful states, facilitating a state of peace, which is another factor, which means what? Creating a peaceful state in as many ways as possible around us, inside of us, everything, right? Kind of music we're listening to, anything we're watching. If we're watching anything, try not to watch anything if we can, but you can do what you can in this world, because it'll pull you back in. Facilitating a state of peace, very important. So we have all these programs in our minds, and sometimes to calm the mind, we have to let them work themselves out. This is what I did unknowingly at first, but then after it was happening, I started to realize I'm reconstituting my mind. I would be driving for many hours at a time for my job, listening to meditation music, and I would basically just be letting my mind work itself out, letting the programs work themselves out. And eventually they spun themselves out and went away. They're done. They work themselves out. We got to the bottom of it, gone. We can do that, and eventually our mind becomes more calm and more empty, because the programs have spun. We've let the programs spin themselves out without adding information and kind of keeping them locked in there. That's very important. Reconstituting the mind, emptying the mind, very important, because that also allows us to get better divine perspectives and divine guidance, right? And allows the divine God to work through us, our cosmic beloved. It allows better open communication with the divine as we empty the mind, as we purify the body, as we stop thinking. Presence, surrender, is allowing God, the divine, to work through us, right? So that's why it's so important. Stop thinking and end all of your problems. Stop thinking and allow the divine to work through us. It's beautiful. What else do I got on here? Another big one is sleep. I've noticed from my own experience, again, balance. It all comes back to balance. We need to make sure we're sleeping enough, make sure we're eating correctly to not aggravate the body, to purify the body, to help calm the mind. Fruits, berries, melons, raw foods, raw vegetables. That's what I eat. Almost entirely raw fruits. Making sure that we're hydrating, getting exercise, doing things like walking, yoga, any kind of exercise, getting sunlight when applicable, grounding, things like this are all things that are going to keep us balanced, making sure we're going to bed at a good time, getting sleep. I've neglected sleep for a long time, and this really threw me out of balance, because not sleeping correctly can cause you to be more aggravated, can cause the mind to be more aggravated, because you're fighting this lack of energy and vitality from not getting enough sleep. Not getting enough sleep can cause you to not follow a proper purification, a proper a cleansing type of diet as well, because when you're more tired, more likely to eat worse. So sleep is very important, which I've noticed, which I've been trying to focus on more myself, right, as part of my balance. So sleep, removing the aggravators, facilitating a state of peace, reconstituting the mind, purification in general, doing things like yoga, exercise, eating raw living foods. Why do I say raw living foods and not any other kind of foods? Because from my experience and my observation, this is what makes sense to me through trying to regain my common sense. That's another video, why we've lost common sense, but it's along the same lines as what we've been talking about. People think they know, and they're stuck in these hardened states of perspectives and ego and somebodyness, and they're attached to thinking like a group or a culture or society like of people, and it overrides, and they have emotional imbalances that causes common sense to be overridden. So this is another thing. But again, balance, so important. This is how we break this spell of thought. Balance, presence, purification, all these things work together, hand in hand. All these things, our main focus, laser focus, is always presence and purification, because just focusing on those two things will bring everything else into balance. And part of things like purification is sleeping enough, making sure we're moving, exercising the body. When the body allows us, sometimes, and we're in deep states of purification or detoxification, the body is telling us to rest, which is okay. Listen to the body. Removing the aggravators is a huge one, because if we're taking in things that are aggravating and stimulating the mind, and then also the body, through eating wrong foods, eating junk foods, acidic foods, mucus forming foods, if we're taking in all these things that are aggravating us, it's going to be very hard to stop thinking. You're going to be fighting an uphill battle, trying to practice presence if you're not practicing purification. Practicing presence if we're not removing the unnecessary stimulation. Again, until we get to the point where we can be the observer in these moments of stimulation and aggravation. But ideally, we look at things like the monks and things and what they're doing, right? And they facilitate a state of peace. So thank you for joining me, my friends. My phone's actually about to die. I didn't charge it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I am so grateful you are able to share a moment with me. And may the cosmic beloved send you all the love and light in the universe. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. Namaste.